In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NBA games happening on January 2nd, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NBA games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. San Antonio Spurs versus Indiana Pacers. You look at this matchup and it feels like the classic trap spot for bettors. Big shiny record on one side, ugly record on the other, and a number in the middle that looks like, yeah, sure, that favorite wins by that much all the time. San Antonio rolls in with that contender vibe, strong point differential, and an offense that has been one of the more efficient groups in the league this season, even when they are not flying up and down like a track meet team. Indiana shows up with a record that screams do not trust this team, a long losing streak, and the kind of net rating that usually lives near the lottery basement. So when books hang a line where San Antonio has to win this on the road by a healthy margin, it is very easy to think the question is simply, how many points do they win by? But here is the thing though, the version of the Spurs that built that resume is not the same version walking into Indianapolis tonight. No Victor Wembanyama, no Devin Vassell, and that changes the whole personality of what they like to do. Without Wembanyama, the rim is not quite as protected and the offense loses that cheat code feel where one player bends space and time every trip. Without Vassell, they lose a clean perimeter scorer who can punish help and bail out broken possessions. San Antonio still has plenty of talent, but now you are asking other guys to close the deal on the road, on the front end of a back-to-back, with travel waiting right after the final buzzer. On the other side, you get Indiana, which looks broken if you stare only at the standings, but the context makes them a little more dangerous than that number suggests. They are a former finals group now forced to play without Tyrese Halliburton and without the safety net of Miles Turner at the back, since he is in Milwaukee. They have leaned harder into Pascal Siakam, Benedict Mathurin, and Andrew Nembhard just to manufacture a functional offense, and that kind of grind builds a weird sort of toughness. You see it in their style: more half-court, more ugly trips, more possessions that come down to whether someone can bully their way into a decent look rather than flowing into a pretty system. That is exactly the kind of game script that can frustrate a road favorite. The Spurs do not play with extreme pace. They are closer to a steady, controlled tempo, and in this spot, that slower rhythm actually gives the underdog extra chances to hang around. If San Antonio gets up early, they also have a very human reason to manage minutes. Think about tomorrow's matchup and avoid turning this into a full 48-minute sprint. Meanwhile, Indiana is playing with house money emotionally. The season has already gone sideways, so this is the kind of night where a home crowd, a hot stretch from Siakam or Mathurin, and a few extra hustle plays can be enough to keep things tight inside the number. You can almost picture it: Spurs in control but never quite away, Pacers hanging around with just enough shot making and whistle luck to make anyone laying points feel very uncomfortable in the fourth. As our first pick for this matchup, the Indiana Pacers to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. This total hints at a game where both teams run, the scoreboard never stops, and every missed shot just turns into a fast break the other way. If you only looked at San Antonio's offensive success and Indiana's defensive problems, you would nod and say, yeah, that checks out. But when you factor in who is missing and how these two teams actually get their points right now, the picture cools off a bit. San Antonio's scoring punch is very real, but so much of the scariness comes from the threat of Wembanyama collapsing defenses and Vassell stretching the floor. Take them off the board and the attack gets more deliberate, more Fox and Castle reading the floor, more bigs finishing plays rather than living off easy advantages on every trip. That kind of offense can still be efficient, but the margin for error shrinks and there are simply fewer automatic "this is a bucket no matter what" possessions. Indiana, meanwhile, has gone from one of the most explosive groups in basketball last season to a bottom-ranked offense this year. And that is not an accident. Losing Halliburton for the full year has ripped the engine out of their transition game and their half-court creation at the same time. They still play at a healthy pace. The numbers say they are right around that 100 possessions per game neighborhood. But there is a big difference between running with an efficient primary playmaker and running with a committee that struggles to shoot. You get more empty trips, more broken possessions, and more of those long, tired offensive sets that end in contested jumpers. There is also the simple human part that models never see. The Pacers are short bodies with Obi Toppin and Isaiah Jackson sidelined, which means front court depth is thin and lineups get a little funky as the game wears on. Tired legs do not just miss shots, they slow games down. If this turns into a night where both coaches are managing minutes, protecting players, and living with more half-court sets, that giant total starts to feel like it was built more on last season's highlight reels than this season's reality. Could a whistle-heavy game with lots of free throws still push it higher than you expect? Sure, that is always live in the modern league, especially with a struggling defense that reaches a lot. But looking at how Indiana's offense has cratered, how much firepower San Antonio has sitting in street clothes, and how both teams' true pace is lively but not wild, a slightly more modest scoring environment looks more likely than the number suggests. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Brooklyn Nets versus Washington Wizards. The Nets come into this matchup still short-handed, with Igor Demon not in the mix and Michael Porter Jr. listed as out because of illness. They also have to shake off a bad loss to the Rockets, which is not exactly the kind of momentum you brag about. They have had stretches where they look competent, especially away from home, but they are still a flawed group that has trouble justifying being priced as a clear favorite. On the other side, the Wizards are suddenly acting like a team that remembered it gets paid to compete. They have won 3 of their last 4 games, and that dramatic win over the Bucks as a double-digit underdog is the kind of result that sticks in a locker room and in a betting market. That kind of upset can give a young team a little swagger, even if the roster is still far from polished. Here's the thing. The Nets are in the less comfortable spot, on the road, on the second night of a back-to-back, and still trying to convince people that they are better than their overall profile suggests. They are only 6-10 against the spread in their last 16 games as a favorite, which fits the eye test. They are more fun to catch as a scrappy dog than trust as the team that has to win by margin. When a team keeps underperforming in the favorite role, it usually means the market keeps giving them a little too much respect compared to what they actually produce on the court. The Wizards, for all their flaws, have the cleaner situational spot. They are at home, they have the rest advantage, and they have recent proof that their ceiling performance can hang with a high-level opponent. You still would not say you trust Washington because there is plenty of chaos baked into their style, but lately they have at least been rewarding that leap of faith more than Brooklyn has in this kind of number. Honestly, if the Wizards bring something close to the energy and focus they showed in that win over Milwaukee, they can make this look relatively comfortable. The line leans too heavily toward the Nets, like the odds makers are still grading them on reputation more than reality, and that opens the door for the home underdog to cover if they simply match their recent form. As our first pick for this matchup, the Washington Wizards to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The Nets are averaging 109.3 points on 44.9% shooting, while allowing 114.1 points on 48.6%. Their three-point shooting sits at 34.8%, and they hit 78.1% at the free throw line, which is solid but not exactly explosive. They also allow opponents to shoot 37.1% from deep and pull in 39.9 rebounds per game, so they are not dominating the glass enough to generate a bunch of extra easy points. The Wizards, by contrast, play in a way that often invites high totals, at least on paper. They are putting up 113.2 points per game on 46.1% shooting, while giving up 124.7 points on 47%. They knock down 36.2% of their threes and 75.5% of their free throws, and they grab 44.3 rebounds per game, which means there are plenty of possessions and plenty of second-chance opportunities floating around. Here is the twist. Those raw numbers scream offense and weak defense, but this particular matchup and spot can still lean shorter on the scoreboard. A tired Nets team on the back end of a back-to-back often settles for jumpers, and with their three-point percentage sitting in the mid-30s, a cold stretch can drag the pace of the game down quickly. If their legs are not fully there, that 109.3 scoring average may be more of a ceiling than a baseline in this spot. On the Wizards side, their recent breakout against the Bucks can come with a little regression. Teams that punch above their usual level in one big game often come back to something closer to their season median next time out. Their shooting numbers are good, but not unstoppable, and if they lean more on rebounding and physicality, that can create longer, messier possessions instead of a pure track meet. So while both teams' season stats suggest fireworks, the combination of Nets fatigue, their inconsistent shooting, and a possible cool-down from Washington creates a realistic path to a lower-scoring game than the raw averages would imply. You can still imagine some runs and scoring bursts, but stretched over 4 quarters, the total has a strong chance to land under the projected number rather than turning into a full-on scoring festival. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Atlanta Hawks versus New York Knicks. Madison Square Garden on a Friday night is not exactly a friendly welcome mat for a team still trying to steady itself. Atlanta walks in at 16-19, fresh off snapping that 7-game skid in Minnesota, so they finally exhaled a little, but no one is confusing them with a consistent group yet. New York, on the other hand, sits at 23-10 with a ridiculous 15-2 record at home, which feels less like a number and more like a big neon sign telling visitors to brace themselves. Sportsbooks have basically nodded along to that story, hanging the Knicks as roughly 7.5-point favorites and leaving the Hawks to grab the points, which is the market's way of saying, we trust New York's habits more right now. Here is the thing though, it is not just about the records on a graphic. This Knicks team has been living in big moment basketball for a while now, from the cup run to that deep playoff push and then this recent string of tight finishes in places like New Orleans and San Antonio, where you really feel every possession. Their core of Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, and Mikal Bridges has settled into a closing routine under Mike Brown, slow things down late, find the mismatch, and let a top 3 offense by efficiency do its work instead of playing hero ball. It sounds simple, but in the last few minutes of a close game, that kind of structure is gold, and it is the difference between we hope something good happens and we know where the ball is going and why. Atlanta, by contrast, feels much more volatile. Yes, that win over Minnesota looked great. They finally looked loose again. Jalen Johnson attacked. Kristaps Porzingis stretched the floor. Nickeil Alexander-Walker filled in the gaps, and for a night everything clicked. But zoom out a little and you see a team that has dropped 12 of its last 17 and has let opponents get to at least 125 points in most of those losses, including a 140-129 shootout with Oklahoma City and that 128-125 battle with these same Knicks just a few days ago. That is the profile of a group that can explode in bursts yet spends long stretches trying to plug leaks. There is also the health piece that quietly shapes how confident you can feel about each side. The Hawks are already without N'Faly Dante for the season with the torn ACL. Several depth guys are sitting in that doubtful G League-related category, and the whole game has a different tone if Trae Young, who is officially questionable with the quad contusion, is either limited or out. New York is not perfectly healthy either. They are missing Josh Hart and Landry Shamet, and Mitchell Robinson's ankle is in that questionable we will see zone, but their primary engines are ready to go, which matters when you are trying to cover a favorite's number rather than just squeak by. Honestly, when you stack it all together, it feels less like a classic trap spot and more like a situation where a locked-in home team with clear late-game habits is facing a visitor that still treats defense like a suggestion more than a rule. As our first pick for this matchup, the New York Knicks to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. If you have watched Atlanta this season, this total number does not feel as wild as it looks on paper. They play fast, top 10 in pace, always looking to get out and go, and they score around 119 points a night, so they are rarely short on firepower even when the results are messy. New York is only a tick slower by tempo, hovering in that high 90 possessions per game range, yet they are actually even more explosive on the scoreboard at roughly 121 points per game, backed by one of the most efficient offenses in the league. So you have a matchup where both sides are pretty comfortable trading punches instead of grinding through long, slow half-court sets. The more interesting part is what happens when they are asked to get stops. Atlanta's defense has been extremely generous, giving up about 120 points per game and letting opponents hit 125 or more in a big chunk of their recent outings, including that 140-129 loss to Oklahoma City and the 128-125 thriller against New York. That is not a fluke, that is a pattern. On the other side, the Knicks were built with a defensive identity in mind, but lately they have leaned hard into, we will just outscore you, and even their own coach has gone public about how the defense has slipped during this recent stretch. That combination, one leaky defense and one slightly tired one, usually points in the same direction for totals bettors. The injury list actually leans into a higher scoring script too. New York is missing Josh Hart's toughness on the perimeter and some of that all-around glue, and with Mitchell Robinson not entirely certain, their usual safety net at the rim is at least a bit wobbly. Atlanta is without Dante as a big body and rim presence, so their back line protection is lighter than it looks on a depth chart. Meanwhile, the players who are healthy and featured are mostly scorers, shooters, and creators, the kind of guys who pull the game toward spacing, threes, and early clock looks rather than long defensive possessions. Recent game logs for both teams read more like video game scores than old-school defensive battles, which quietly supports what the line is hinting at. New York has been living in the 120s and 130s in those wild finishes with New Orleans, San Antonio, and Atlanta. The Hawks just exploded against Minnesota and have had other nights in the 120 to 130 range against strong opponents, even while losing. So while a total in the mid-240s might make casual fans blink, when you layer in the pace, the offensive efficiency, the defensive slippage on both sides, and the way injuries have chipped away more at defensive glue than offensive talent, it starts to feel like a high bar that is very reachable if the game flows the way these teams usually play. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Denver Nuggets versus Cleveland Cavaliers. Denver is limping into this matchup, still without Nikola Jokic, Aaron Gordon, Christian Braun, and Cameron Johnson, just to name the key absences. Cleveland is not fully healthy either, with Max Strus and Larry Nance Jr. already ruled out and DeAndre Hunter and Sam Merrill both sitting in that annoying gray area of questionable. That kind of injury sheet can make a game feel less like a clean matchup and more like a rotation puzzle. The Nuggets have clearly hit a lull in their season, which makes sense when your star centerpiece and multiple rotation pieces are missing, and suddenly everyone is playing a role one size larger than usual. The Cavaliers, on the other hand, walk into this one priced as heavy favorites at home, boosted by the confidence of a strong showing in their last outing, that big win over the Suns. Here is the thing. On paper, you can easily imagine Cleveland taking care of business comfortably at home, especially with Denver so depleted and trying to survive long stretches with patchwork lineups. The talent gap with Jokic and Gordon out is obvious. Still, the number matters. There are spots where the market leans a bit too far toward the obvious narrative, and this feels like one of those, with the line inflated against a wounded Nuggets team that may still have enough structure and pride to hang around. Short-handed groups often tighten up defensively, slow things down a bit, and treat every possession like it actually matters, which can keep games closer than expected. So while the Cavaliers are likely to be more comfortable on their home floor, the spread itself looks a touch too rich, and that is where the value tilts toward Denver grabbing the points. As our first pick for this matchup, the Denver Nuggets to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The Denver Nuggets are averaging 125.1 points on 51.1% shooting and allowing 118 points on 47.1% shooting. They are shooting 40.2% from beyond the arc and 82.7% from the free throw line, while allowing opponents to hit 34.9% from deep and grabbing 44.1 rebounds per game. The Cleveland Cavaliers are averaging 119.7 points on 46.4% shooting and allowing 117.1 points on that same 46.4% shooting. They are hitting 34.9% from three, 78.4% from the free throw line, allowing 37.7% from beyond the arc, and pulling down 44.8 rebounds per game. Put that together and you get two teams that, statistically, are living in high-scoring environments. Denver is playing in games where both their offense and defense are pushing totals upward, with elite efficiency on their side and a defense that is giving plenty back. Cleveland, for their part, is not exactly stifling opponents from the perimeter, which matters a lot against a Nuggets team that is knocking down over 40% of its threes. Rebounding numbers on both sides are strong, which often leads to fewer one-and-done possessions and more second-chance points, a quiet driver of overs that does not show up in the headline narrative but shows up on the scoreboard. Even with all the injuries, the style indicators and shooting percentages suggest this matchup can still lean toward a game where scoring comes in steady waves rather than grinding to a halt. So with those offensive outputs and defensive concessions, the projected total looks more likely to be challenged on the high side than protected on the low side. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Orlando Magic versus Chicago Bulls. Chicago comes into this matchup at home as the team getting points, sitting at 16-17 on the season with a 9-8 mark at the United Center, while Orlando arrives at 19-15 and a touch underwater away from home at 8-9. Most sportsbooks have the Magic laying around 4.5 points, give or take that annoying little half point that makes every backdoor cover feel personal. So on paper, the market is saying it trusts Orlando's steadier, playoff-style personality more than Chicago's mood swings. Here's the thing. Orlando leans on structure and physical defense, living in that upper tier of the league on the defensive end, the kind of team that would rather squeeze the air out of a game than trade highlights all night. Chicago, on the other hand, is chaos in a jersey, a team with a strong enough offense to scare anyone and a shaky enough defense to stress everyone, sometimes in the same quarter. That kind of high variance is exactly what you secretly like when you are catching points. If you have watched the Bulls swing from lifeless to lava hot in a few minutes, you know how fast a favorite can start sweating a spread. Honestly, that shows up in how they have been performing against the number, especially when they are not the team expected to YI. As a general pattern, Chicago has been punching above its weight as an underdog and holding its own as a home dog, which is not glamorous, but it is the sort of quietly useful thing bettors love more than a mixtape dunk. It is less about being good in the standings and more about being annoying to put away. Injuries tilt the story even more. Orlando comes in without Franz Wagner, who is sidelined by that high ankle sprain, and Moritz Wagner, who is working his way back from his knee issue, with Jonathan Isaac sitting in that uneasy gray area as questionable on a sore left knee, and Colin Castleton listed out as well. Chicago, on their side, is missing a huge chunk of its guard play. Josh Giddey is shelved with a left hamstring strain, Kobe White is out with a right calf issue, Zach Collins is dealing with a toe sprain, rookie lottery pick, Noah Essengue is done for the year with shoulder surgery, and depth forwards like Trenton Flowers and Emmanuel Miller are managing lower body problems. So the Magic are funneling even more responsibility toward Paolo Banchero and Desmond Bane to create in the half-court, while the Bulls are pushed to lean into Nikola Vucevic as a hub and let bigger wings like Matas Buzelis and Isaac Okoro scrap for mismatches and earn trips to the line instead of just trading jump shots. If you picture that with a loud Chicago crowd, a short number, and a group that knows it needs to hang around the middle of the Eastern Conference rather than slide backward, it feels less like a smooth road win spot for Orlando and more like a long, messy fight that the Bulls can keep inside that spread. As our first pick for this matchup, the Chicago Bulls to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Odds makers have this number sitting in the mid-230s, with openers around 233.5 and some alternate numbers climbing toward the high 230s. On the surface, it screams track meet. You see Orlando scoring in the 100 teens on average, Chicago living even higher in the scoring column, and the Bulls giving up a big number on defense, and it is very easy to assume fireworks. Let me explain why that first instinct might be a little misleading. Orlando does not actually play like a pure run-and-gun team. Their pace sits around average, and their comfort zone is still the kind of game where their defense sets the tone and the other side has to work for everything. They can absolutely score, but they are not trying to play like an all-star exhibition in every arena. Chicago, for all the talk about their defense giving up points, is not racing up and down non-stop either. A lot of those high final scores come from swings late, fouling, and frantic finishes, not 48 minutes of pure speed. Now layer the injuries on top, and the picture shifts again. Take away Josh Giddey and Kobe White, who are central to what Chicago wants to do as creators and scorers, plus the steady double-digit scoring that Zach Collins usually brings, and you almost force the Bulls into a slower, more deliberate rhythm. That means more touches for Vucevic on the block, more methodical pick and roll with guys like Trey Jones and Ayo Dosunmu, and more minutes for defense-first wings, such as Okoro. Those are the kinds of lineups that naturally let the shot clock tick down a little longer. On the Magic side, they are missing Franz Wagner's ability to attack off the bounce and Moritz Wagner's scoring off the bench, and with Isaac at best a true game-time decision, the rotation leans even more toward defense, strength, and free throws than toward a barrage of jumpers. This whole trip feels like one where Orlando can live with ugly if ugly gets them a win. When you put all of that next to a total sitting in the mid-230s, built more on raw season scoring numbers than on how these particular versions of the rosters might actually play together tonight, it starts to feel like a game that is more likely to settle in the low to mid-220s than one that needs both teams to clear 115 in regulation. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.